Dozens are dead after a Russian-built cargo plane crashes in the South Sudanese capital. A closer look at the African angle of the migrant crisis with the State Department's point person on international migration. And the changing trends and styles in the French wedding industry. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. Vincent Makori is off today. This is Africa 54. Tragedy struck South Sudan Wednesday when a plane crashed shortly after taking off from the busy Juba airport, killing at least 32 people. Officials say one survivor, a young child, has been found. Reports say the Russian-built Antonov cargo plane plummeted just 800 meters from the runway, landing in thick woods along the shore of the White Nile River. It remains unclear if all of the victims had been aboard the plane or if some were on the ground at the time of the crash. Reuters News reports that the plane had a total of 18 people on board, including the plane's 6-member crew. The crew was comprised of 5 Armenians and 1 Russian, all killed in the crash. News reports say the plane had been headed for oil fields in Upper Nile State. Reports from the wreckage say it appears to have been carrying a cargo of food supplies as well as passengers. Voice of America and on Africa 54 continues to highlight the plight of African refugees and migrants, a subject that has caught the attention of key policymakers in the United States. And joining me in the studio is Catherine Wiesner, Deputy Assistant Secretary, Bureau of Population, Refugees, Migration at the U.S. Department of State. Catherine, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for keeping this topic on the spotlight. And let's talk about your recent trip to Africa and your perspective on what you saw on the ground. You visited Sudan, Somalia, and Kenya.
Sure, thank you. And maybe I'll start with just a brief overview of the situation writ large on the continent for refugees. I think I can say, to be brutally honest, that the situation of refugees in Africa, at least in terms of sheer numbers, is as bad as it has ever been. The number of refugees across the continent has risen to 4.8 million, and there are also almost 12 million people who are displaced internally within their countries. These are people who have been displaced from and within Mali, Central African Republic, South Sudan, Nigeria, Burundi. This is in the last few years. It's on top of large populations of refugees already from Somalia, from Democratic Republic of Congo, from Eritrea. So you have a lot of people that have been uprooted from their homes. And I think that people are starting to recognize that some of this is at the base of some of the migration challenges that we're seeing. Some of these people have been displaced for many, many years, and in addition, the resources to meet some of their basic needs are just not there. With so many crises around the world, including Syria, for example, the whole humanitarian response system has really been stretched, and resources have been stretched. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees says that they're only 50% funded in many places. In some places in Africa, they're only 25% funded. And this means a lot of basic needs are not being met. Just the opportunity for refugees to have basic shelter and food is sort of under threat. And then when you think of what else young refugees might want for themselves in their lives, the opportunity to go to school and to support themselves, you start to realize some of the factors that can be behind some of this migration. I do want to say that as a government, even in the face of these really daunting challenges, we remain absolutely committed to humanitarian assistance in Africa. The bureau that I represent programmed some $800 million last year. That was a record, and hopefully with the generosity of our Congress, we'll continue to be able to do that. But we're also investing a lot in diplomatic engagements to try to seek to end some of these conflicts that are generating such displacement in South Sudan, in Congo, in Nigeria. And we're also always looking for ways to promote solutions.
And Catherine, when you say you just came from there, you saw all this desperation and people are looking for a better life. They don't even have any opportunity to even go to school, some of them. So when you talked to governments in Africa, what are they saying? What is their perspective? What do they expect to do to help in their own capacity before they can get aid from outside?
I mean, by and large, we first have to recognize that most African governments have been incredibly generous in keeping their borders open and allowing people to find safety and sanctuary there. That's our first diplomatic objective. At the same time, with all of this media focus on Europe right now, you've heard some African leaders say publicly that what Europe is now experiencing is something that they have experienced for many, many years, contended with large numbers of people flowing across their borders, needing immediate assistance. And so I think it's quite important to emphasize that there really is an international need for responsibility sharing. This is a global crisis. It's not new in some parts of the world. It's becoming more apparent because of where people are traveling to. But the numbers of displaced people have been there, and African governments have been contending with that for some time. In addition, I think it's quite important within Africa that not only keeping borders open and not sending people back to harm, governments also have to be quite careful about maintaining the civilian nature of some of these refugee camps and not to let them become exploited by armed actors, by opposition groups who might seek to do that. But ultimately, I think what we're looking for is to support some of the more progressive policies towards hosting refugees that are emerging in Africa, but also around the world, which is essentially to see refugees as economic contributors, to allow them the opportunity to work, to cultivate land, to become self-reliant in a way that they're not a burden on the countries that are hosting them, but can contribute to them.
But most of these countries see that burden. They don't see a lot of help from outside. And probably you've heard, like in Kenya, where the president says it's too much. There are so many refugees from different countries in, say, Dadaab camp. And you've been there sometimes back, and you know how the situation is. So how does the United States help, or Europe, and how is this integrated so that the countries that are taking in so many refugees are able to survive and also give help to those refugees?
Yeah, so as I said, we programmed more than 800 million last year in humanitarian assistance, and I know that Europe is also looking at increasing the amount of money that they invest, not only in humanitarian assistance, but also development funds, and that's quite important. If donor governments, if the World Bank can work together with African governments, as I said, to see refugees as more of an economic opportunity and include them in development planning, invest development dollars in those areas, that you can find some win-win solutions. At the same time, as you said, I was there and engaging with government leaders. No matter how much is invested in areas of origin, in creating opportunities for young people, they will always seek, if they don't see those opportunities for themselves, they will always seek them elsewhere. And so I was really struck in talking to one of the Somali government officials recently. He's preparing, as are all the governments in the region, to go to an upcoming summit in Valletta with the European Union and the African Union, which is essentially building on a number of political discussions that have been held around managing irregular migration, cracking down on smuggling and trafficking, in fact, even returning economic migrants, having better systems in place for that, but now with much more of emphasis on this investment in root causes. But this Somali official was saying to me, even if we invest in the areas where people come from and create opportunities, there will be people who will want to seek those opportunities elsewhere. And so he was talking about his vision for scholarships, international scholarships for young people, for the ability to move, for jobs, labor migration. And I think that's a really important part of the dialogue, that we also need legal channels for migration.
Catherine, very quickly, tell us, does the U.S. plan to increase the number of African refugees coming into the country? Because as we see now, most of the spotlight is being shown on Syria, the Syrian refugees coming here.
We do, and in terms of durable solutions for refugees, usually the first and best option is always for them to be able to return home when there's peace in their country. We also support other solutions like local integration where possible. There are some efforts right now in Tanzania and Zambia. But resettlement to third countries is also a durable solution, and one to which the United States is committed. We will be increasing the number. We've doubled it in the last 4 years. It will be up to 25,000 next year. And so as we increase the numbers globally, we are also doing so for Africa.
Thank you so much, Catherine. We have to leave it there. Catherine, thank you. It's Catherine Wiesner, the Deputy Assistant Secretary, Bureau of Population, Refugees and Migration at the U.S. Department of State. Russian officials say they are expanding the search area around the site of the crash of a Russian plane in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula while refraining from announcing what caused the aircraft to crash. Africa 54's Clara Frank has our report.
Minister Vladimir Puchkov briefed reporters in Moscow.
The investigation group is continuing to work on the air crash area. We have expanded the search area to 40 square kilometers, and I ask people to organize a thorough examination of the whole territory.
Russian crisis management chief Alexei Smirnov said investigators are conducting additional examination of the plane's fuselage. A U.S. military satellite detected a heat flash at the time the Russian jetliner crashed, but authorities said neither a missile launch nor engine burn was detected. Meanwhile, Russian Deputy Health Minister Igor Kagramanyan said they are examining the crash victims and their belongings for clues.
Forensic examinations of personal belongings delivered by the emergency ministry is being held. Samples of biological materials are being taken from those who died and from their relatives. Those materials have already been delivered to Moscow.
Experts told U.S. media outlets Tuesday the heat flash detected could point to a catastrophic event aboard the aircraft, such as an exploding bomb, the explosion of an aircraft engine, or a fire aboard the Metrojet A321, or even just the aircraft parts hitting the ground. In Egypt, investigators began their examination of the flight recorders recovered from the wreckage, and Russian families began identifying 140 bodies transported home to St. Petersburg. The Egyptian president has dismissed as propaganda claims by insurgents they brought down the jetliner. Clara Frank, VOA News, Washington.
The multinational petroleum company Shell has failed to clean up communities devastated by oil spills in Nigeria's Niger Delta, according to a report from Amnesty International. Henry Ridgewell reports from London that Shell blames the continued pollution on oil theft and illegal refining.
The creeks around Bodo village in the Niger Delta run thick with oil from an old Shell pipeline. Like thousands of other villagers, Pastor Christian Lekoya Kapande used to rely on the Delta for his livelihood. His fish farm was destroyed by two major spills.
Shell have been here over 50 years. There is no infrastructure from them. But in 2008 and 2009, there was two massive oil spills which destroyed the livelihood of Bodo people. Bodo people are fishermen and farmers.
Oil leaked into Bodo Creek from the Trans-Niger pipeline for several weeks in 2008 until Shell repaired it. Shell blames those and later spills on locals tapping the pipeline to steal oil. Bodo is one of 4 sites investigated in the joint report from Amnesty International and a Nigerian NGO, the Center for Environment, Human Rights and Development.
We saw streams that are still polluted. We saw oil sheen on the surface of water. We saw crude oil clearly visible in the environment.
Kamara says the local communities are devastated.
They breathe contaminated air. They plant in polluted soil and they harvest polluted crops. And as a result, they can't feed their children with healthy food.
The United Nations Environment Programme exposed widespread oil pollution in the Ogoniland region of the Delta in 2011, describing it as an urgent public health risk. In response to Amnesty's report, a Shell spokesperson said Shell Petroleum Development Corporation is committed to cleaning up all spills from its facilities, irrespective of cause. The statement adds it is crucial to put an end to the widespread theft and illegal refining of crude oil. Amnesty wants more details on Shell's clean-up operations.
They should firstly produce a comprehensive report that shows who cleaned, when it was cleaned, how it was cleaned, so that people can know.
Amnesty released its report ahead of the 20th anniversary of the execution of Ken Saro-Wiwa, who campaigned against the damage caused by the oil industry in the Niger Delta. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Militants claiming to belong to the Islamic State terrorist group have recently wrested control from the Taliban in certain areas of eastern Afghanistan. Locals say the brutality shown by this new bunch is unprecedented. VOA's Ayesha Tasnim traveled to Nangarhar province to talk to some of the victims.
He carries this passport-sized picture with him in memory of his dead son. Militants from the so-called Islamic State group killed the 15-year-old boy.
My son went to get wood from the mountain on his donkey to sell. He was very young, only 15. They fired 3 bullets in his chest. His name was Khalid.
Hundreds of others in eastern Afghanistan have been killed, beheaded, or sometimes blown up with explosives by the violent group. Victims include tribal elders, members of security forces, anyone who opposes the group, and sometimes just random civilians. This man is an eyewitness to some of that violence and was almost beheaded himself. He is still afraid to reveal his identity. IS accused him of being in border police. They took him away and made him wear an orange jumpsuit. As they got ready to behead him, locals intervened.
Locals, old people, old women intervened. They said to IS fighters, "He is a kid. Why are you beheading him?" They let me go. They killed the others who were there. Some they blew up, others they beheaded, and some they shot with guns. Allah saved me.
This video, uploaded by IS, shows the group blowing up 10 men, some of them old. All belonged to the local Shinwari tribe. Such violence has forced many to flee their homes.
This family is living in this tent because they had to leave their home and run away. They've experienced the violence of the so-called Islamic State firsthand. A member of their family was beheaded.
After the beheading, IS refused to return the body until the family paid for it.
They were trying to sell even the dead body. They never gave his body back.
Then IS found another way to get the family's money. They captured the dead man's father and threatened to behead him as well. The family paid up and fled the area. The group's brutality is worse than anything people in these areas have experienced before. Compared to them, locals say, Taliban seem almost tame. Aisha Tanzim, VOA News, Nangarhar Province, Afghanistan.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54 and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, a closer look at a young African social entrepreneur from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Stay with us.
News and notes. This is Living Better.
Dementia affects many millions of mostly older people. The disease can be overwhelming to patients and caregivers. But in Australia, patients in facilities around Tasmania are getting visits from some new four-legged friends, courtesy of Delta therapy dogs.
It's very relaxing, they mellow, they start chatting, they talk to a dog very often first and then they'll talk to us. The dog's obviously more important.
Care coordinator Dave Dunkerley says that therapy dogs have a calming effect on dementia patients.
Particularly with dementia, you can get some undesirable behaviours at times, and of course they can't help it, but the dogs tend to lessen the behaviours.
According to the World Health Organization, there are about 47 million people worldwide living with dementia, a number that's expected to double in 20 years. I'm Martin Seacrest for VOA's Living Better.
Welcome back. Liberian Vice President Joseph Boakai was in Washington this week to participate in the ceremonial signing of a $257 million Millennium Challenge Cooperation Compact at the U.S. State Department. During an in-depth interview with VOA's James Buddy, he talked about the significance of the compact.
Well, beside the fact that this is money coming into the country to benefit infrastructure, namely electricity and roads, it is very significant in that the compact is about governance, and it does underscore the fact that we are trying to do our best to put the right institutions into place.
Vice President Boakai added that the agreement also shows the United States is a true partner of Liberia. The Liberian Vice President also announced He is running to succeed President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf in 2017 presidential election, and that he will be running on the Sirleaf government's record, which he says includes 10 years of unbroken peace, infrastructure development, and freedom of the press. We'll have more of Mr. Boakai's comments on Friday, so be sure to tune in. Continuing our profile series on the Young African Leadership Initiative, today's focus is on a social entrepreneur who heads a solar energy company in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country where most of the people do not have electricity. We take you now to San Francisco, California, where he spent his work internship at the largest solar provider in the United States.
My name is Malango Washikala. I am from the Democratic Republic of Congo. I have a solar company that distributes solar energy systems to off-grid and electrified households.
Malango Washikola is the co-founder and co-director of Alltech. He founded the business because he wants people to have safe access to light and electricity.
They use dirty sources of energy like kerosene, lamps, candles, but also firewood in order to have light. Our country was still experiencing some of the instabilities in the eastern part of the DRC. And the business model that we developed was kind of risky because we distribute solar kits and products on credit. And we spread the payment over like 2 to 3 months.
Washikola believes the kind of business he runs is one of the reasons he was selected for the Young African Leadership Initiative.
I'm getting more than what I expected. We were exposed to concepts on how to put our customers first and to involve design in every business activity that we undertake.
Washikola spent 6 weeks at Solar City, the largest solar provider in the United States, learning much from his colleagues and how a large company is managed.
Being at Solar City at this stage while they're expanding fast, it provides me with a lot of skills and knowledge that I can apply back home when I go back to my country.
Solar City's nonprofit subsidiary, the Give Power Foundation, works with local vendors to provide solar equipment and service for a particular region in the world.
It will be our first time working there when we deploy projects with Washikola in the DR Congo, and very excited to work in a new region, work with health clinics, and very confident that Washikola's group is going to do a great job with these projects, and we'll continue to work with them.
In just a short amount of time, we've been able to develop a pilot project, and he's going to take that home with him, and we are going to continue to work together as partners, which is the best outcome, I think, from this whole opportunity.
In Solar City, most of this stuff has become a lifestyle. It's not only about the salaries and everything, it's also believing in the impact that the company is creating in people's lives.
Washikola's mission now? To reach 2 million off-grid and under-electrified households and institutions in 5 years in the DR Congo. For VOA News, I'm Philip Alexio.
It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, the French wedding industry taps into a growing market. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In South Sudan, a Russian cargo plane crashes Wednesday morning, killing dozens and leaving only 3 survivors. In the Central African Republic, President Catherine Samba-Panza says the UN is failing to stop violence as unrest continues between Christians and Muslim groups. In Uganda, the Electoral Commission approves incumbent President Yoweri Museveni and challenger Amama Mbabazi to run in the presidential elections scheduled next year. Finally, in Ivory Coast, President Alassane Ouattara is inaugurated for a second 5-year term following a peaceful election. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
And welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Oscar winner Halle Berry and actor Olivier Martinez have filed their separate petitions for divorce, and soon they will be faced with separating their vast assets as well. So far, Berry has expressed an interest in keeping the divorce proceedings as easy and amicable as possible, according to a source close to the situation. She's asked for no spousal support for either party and for the costs of raising their child to be shared as per the terms of their prenup. Martinez, meanwhile, asks for issues of spousal support to be sorted out at a later date. Next up, it's a catwalk with an exotic twist. Models on ornate Middle Eastern-themed wedding gowns strut past dozens of professionals in the wedding industry. Arabic and Muslim weddings are a booming trade in France, with some families spending up to $22,000 and more on the big day. For organizers of the 8th big Arabic wedding fair in Paris, this means there's more money to be made from glamorous wedding gowns and jewelry to the latest in stylish celebrations. According to the last census, there are about 6 million Muslims in France. And finally, a smartphone app designed for Syrian refugees arriving in Germany aims to make the transition to a new life easier. The Dresden-based IT firms have launched the Welcome to Germany app to help refugees find their feet when they arrive. The companies launched a Dresden-specific app earlier this year. It has now been downloaded over 5,000 times on Apple, Windows, and Android devices. The expanded Welcome to Germany app was launched at the start of October and has been downloaded over 1,000 times. It gives refugees information on where to apply for asylum, what documents to bring, who to contact in an emergency, and how to join a German course, basic German laws, and where to get food and much more. The app is available in Arabic, English, and German. And that's what's trending today. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune into VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching, and good night from Washington.